In this video, we will compare Zen 2 architecture to the previous Zen 1 architecture, and we will look into the official documentation and look some differences, what's new inside, because those those pictures, they are not describing everything what's happened inside the core. For example, we can see on the official pictures there is like a third memory unit here, which is, but it's kind of not true, because there is only address generation unit, but there is already in the Zen 1 there is a 3 pipelines. Even it's not in the picture here. So we will take a look onto some official documentation. So let's start with the execution units first. So on the left side, this is the Zen 1 documentation from 2017 for the 17H family. And on the right side, we have the documentation updated from August 2019. So this is the Zen 2 architecture. So let's compare those documents. So there is a still 4 integer LAUs, so there is no big difference in this. Each of them can do, there is a 1 multiplication, 1 division, and 1 CRC. But the difference is here, there is a 2 address generation units in the Zen 1, and the Zen 2 has a 3 address generation units for the memory. But if we take a look on the load store unit, we can see that there is even the Zen 1 on the left side has 3 largely independent pipelines for the load store. And of course, this is 128-bit, and Zen 2 has a 256-bit, so it's double wider. But in terms of number of the pipelines, there is already in the Zen 1 is 3 pipelines. So it's kind of confusion. If we take a look to the schematics, you know, there is 3 pipelines here, but only 2 address generation units. And yeah, so this schematics is kind of not right. So I made a new schematics here. So it should be like here. There is a 3 pipelines actually, but only 2 address generation units, and there is a 1 special store unit. And those address generation units can do this, can generate the address for the store for this pipeline. So this is more exact. So in terms of micro-ops, the Zen 1 is able to issue 11 micro-ops per cycle, the same as the Zen 2. Just there is a more functionality in the Zen 2 architecture. And the last thing, we will take a look on the floating point. So in terms of floating point units, there didn't change like nothing in terms of functionality. Of course, Zen 2 floating point units are like a 256-bit wide, of course, double wider than the Zen 1. But another interesting thing is that is this red spot, because there is a 1 store unit to be able to move from the floating point registers to general purpose registers. So it's kind of store unit inside in the pipeline of the floating point unit. So this is really interesting. And another interesting thing is there is only 1 floating point division unit. The last pipeline, the third, actually 4th pipeline, has a division unit. So we can see there is a more store units than is described in the picture. And it's also interesting in compared to the division, because if we compare, for example, to the Cortex X1, which was released this year, so we can see that the Cortex X1 has a 4 pipelines in the floating point here. So this is the floating point scheduler, and we can see here there is a one division here and second division here. So potentially, so it's kind of really strong. This Cortex X1 is really strong floating in terms of floating point units. Is even wider in the integer. It's really beast. It's but this is only 128 bit wide neon instruction set, but it has a almost double capability of the Zen, actually, Zen 2. So, and because the Cortex X1 is probably the base of the Zeus platform for the servers, for the N2, Neoverse N2, this is actually huge. This is big beast. And so we will see this year how the new platform of this server will compete with the AMD Zen 3 and Zen 2. But yeah, we can see that the functionality of the arms are really strong, actually. I'm not speaking about the Apple. Apple can do 3 instructions per cycle in the floating point. So Apple is different beast. Apple is the best architecture in the world, so let's not talk about it. But Zen 2 is pretty decent, and yeah, Zen 2 is just a little evolution with a big effect from the Zen 1. So it's a pretty nice CPU, actually. I would like to mention the Zen development, which is really related to the Jim Keller. And Jim Keller moved from Apple. And I actually read some rumor that the Zen 1 architecture, Zen 1, Zen 2, the 17H family, is really kind of related to the early Apple chips, as for example the A7 Cyclone here. And so I did some smaller research, and actually it's kind of true, because it has a 4 wide integer, it has a 2 load store units, and it has also able to do 2 instructions for the multiplication and 2 instructions for the addition, the same like the Zen. It has also 2 multiplications, 2 additions. So yeah, A7 Cyclone from 2013 looks like kind of grandpa of the Zen architecture. Of course, also in terms of micro-ops, it has like 10 micro-ops per cycle, but we don't know if there is a third pipe, because it can be hidden here, so we don't know. So it's really similar in terms of architecture. I would like to also point out another interesting information about the Zen 2, because when we look at the timeline, the history of the CPU development, we can see here 2012. This is the Jim Keller. He's leaving Apple, and he goes to AMD to help to start Zen 1 development. And also we know the K12 started development here 2012. But interesting thing about the Zen 2 is, because it was released 2019, and CPU development takes usually 4 years. So it started development in the Zen 2 back in 2015. And this is really interesting, because this is the time when Jim Keller left, and also was cancelled AMD K12, the ARM CPU from AMD. So it really looks like that the team which was working on the K12, and it was supposed to start work on the K13 with the SVE instruction set, they probably cancelled the whole the ARM branch, and they moved the stuff to work on Zen 2 architecture. And it's probably because the Skylake also arrived 2015, and Skylake arrived with a really high frequency, really higher, over 4 gigahertz, with a better IPC. So AMD was under really big pressure. Then that's why decided to cancel the ARM. They need something in between the Zen 1 and the new architecture, which is called Zen 3 today. But they need something in between to fight probably the Ice Lake. But at the time, nobody knew that the Ice Lake going to be really delayed. My opinion is that it was a really big mistake to cancel the ARM branch, because ARM is better, especially the SVE instruction set. This is like really superior. It's supporting the vectors up to 2048 bit wide, and x86 has nothing comparable to it. So yeah, ARM instruction set is way better than the x86 right now, and it started back in 2015. So yeah, so this is the origin of the Zen 2. Zen 2 is really good CPU, especially when the delay of the Ice Lake and the problems with the 10 nanometers caused Intel uh, inability to deliver actually the Ice Lake to desktop. So yeah, Zen 2 is kind of really good product, but don't forget, it's just because of the accident and just because Intel has some problems, not because it was a better CPU. Uh, it was just a small evolution of the Zen 1, but really successful. Okay, this is the IPC table, and I would like to show you the Zen 2, and Zen 2 is actually here. And the IPC, in compared to 9900K, the Intel Coffee Lake refresh, is here. So it's kind of 3% over Coffee Lake, and the Coffee Lake is here. So it's pretty close. But we have some intruder here, some alien, and this alien is Cortex A77. In terms of Geekbench 5 benchmark, the Cortex A77 has a pretty good IPC actually, and ARM processors, they already reached the level of the x86, and the new X1, which was released this year, has an IPC like 30% better than the Intel and AMD. So this is kind of threat, because X1, this is like the silicon for the early next year. So this is going to be fighting with the Zen 3, and if Zen 3 has only 15% up to 20% IPC uplift, Zen 3 is not able actually to outperform the Cortex X1. This is kind of problem for AMD, and we will see, especially when the Cortex X1 will be probably the base of the next server platform called Neoverse N2, the Zeus, and it will, instead of neon instruction set vectors, it will have a SVE, the really powerful new instruction set for the vectors. And yeah, I think this is potential problem for AMD. But let's take a look on some graphs. It's even better. Let's see. This is a pretty nice picture, and we can see here the Zen 2 is here. The Cortex A77 is matching the same performance, and if Zen 3 will be somewhere here, 15% above, you can see this Cortex X1. This is a really big problem for AMD and also for Intel, because Intel is going to release a server platform end of this year and for the next year. And yeah, ARM will outperform in terms of IPC the Intel and also AMD. And even they have a better instruction set. The SVE is way better than the x86, the AVX 512. So Yeah, even the Zen 2 is pretty good CPU. They went from Zen 1. It was pretty nice uplift in terms of IPC. Uh, yeah, the Cortex, they are running faster, like a twice faster in terms of IPC development than AMD. So I'm kind of worried as an AMD fan. I am worried about AMD. Even the Zen 2 is a great CPU and much better than the Intel. It brings a lot of IPC over the generation, and but the future outlook, it doesn't look so great actually, especially in compared to the ARMs.